The Collapse. Part 1. Beginning. By V.A. Brandon. Chapter 1. The alarm clock next to Amy's head startled her from a fitful sleep as it played a mechanical version of Morning Mood from Edvard Grieg's Peer Gynt. With a loud groan, she reached over and turned it off. It was 7:30. She rubbed her eyes and blinked at the ceiling-to-glass window a few feet away, taking note of the sunny weather. Today was going to be another perfect day for the beach. She pushed her feet into a pair of fluffy slippers and dragged herself to the kitchen. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and scrambled eggs awaited her, and she shuffled toward the island counter, eyes on the food. "You look like death warmed over," Justin said, smiling over his cup of coffee. "Can't talk? Must eat now." Amy seated herself and bent down to shovel the eggs into her gaping mouth. She reached for the coffee and took a swallow, then winced as the hot liquid washed the eggs down her throat. "Take it easy. You're acting like you haven't eaten in days." Justin frowned as he buttered a slice of toast. "So, what are your plans for today?" Justin was Amy's ex-boyfriend. 2 years ago, they had dated for 6 months, then decided that they were better suited as friends. 3 months ago, he had flown halfway across the country to enroll in a graduate program. Amy had missed him terribly, so she had quit her sales assistant position, emptied out her savings account to buy a ticket, and flown out to visit him. And now here she was, crashing at Justin's apartment, unemployed and penniless. "I don't know. I thought I might head out to the beach," she mumbled as she chewed. "You went to the beach yesterday. And the day before," Justin reprimanded. "Today's Monday. A work day. There's no need to announce to the world that you're a bum." "They might think I'm an entrepreneur if I take my laptop with me," she said defensively. He rolled his eyes. "Do me a favor and turn on the radio, would you? I want to hear the news." It was the usual. Traffic jams, a politician caught red-handed with his mistress at a swanky hotel, a B-list actor set to star in a Survivor-type reality show. Amy yawned. Now that she was here, she had her doubts. Maybe quitting her job hadn't been such a great idea. At the time, it had seemed like the right thing to do. She was a college graduate after all. She couldn't spend her entire life stalking new bag arrivals, a fake smile frozen on her face every time a customer waltzed in through the open doors. Yes, she told herself, quitting had been the right thing to do. She would use the time here to look for proper jobs, and crash at Justin's place for a bit longer. She was sure he wouldn't mind too much. After all, it wasn't like he was hurting financially. The guy had a fat bank account, courtesy of his doting grandmother. A great beauty even in her 40s, she had remarried and divorced a wealthy older man. Savvy when it came to business, but hopelessly naive when it came to love, the man had stupidly promised not to draw up a prenuptial agreement. And it had cost him dearly. After the divorce, Justin's grandmother had ended up with a pretty sum of $30 million. We interrupt this broadcast to go live to Central Creek Mall. "Pete, can you tell us what's happening? We heard that there was a massacre. How many casualties?" "Central Creek Mall?" Amy wondered aloud. "That's only 10 minutes away from here." Sounds of background screams and panting breaths came on air. The reporter was running. "Diane, no one is sure, but early reports have said up to 20 people are dead, with more than 100 grievously injured." "Turn up the volume," Justin said, and Amy complied. She couldn't believe what her ears were hearing. "Does anyone know who the culprit is? Is it a single person acting alone, or an organized attack by a group?" The reporter seemed to be running out of breath. "We don't know yet, but everyone is running and there's chaos everywhere. I can see blood and some people are lying on the ground. They look dead." The female announcer pressed on. "Can you stop to interview someone? Maybe a security guard or a police officer?" There was silence on the other end. "Pete, are you there? Can you hear me? Oh my God. This can't be real. This can't be happening." Sounds of a struggle ensued. "Get off me. No, please don't." The line went dead. "Pete, Can you hear me? Pete. The announcer breathed heavily, rattling sounds filling the air. Once she'd calmed down, she intoned mechanically, "It seems we have been disconnected. Please stay tuned for further updates as we bring you the latest news from SBC News." Immediately after, the soothing voice of Michael Bublé crooned through the airwaves, and Justin turned the radio off, his expression grim. "What's going on?" Amy asked. "What do you think happened to that reporter?" "Let's find out," he answered, and he padded over to the large LCD screen prominently displayed in his living room and turned it on, switching channels on the remote control until it reached a scene of chaos. Amy silently came up behind Justin and looked over his shoulder. Words escaped her as she stared at the unspeakable horror displayed across the wide screen. The camera's bird's eye view was shaky as it circled above the mall, but there was no doubt as to what the viewers were seeing. There were people eating other people. The reporter in the helicopter was shouting. "As you can see, there are countless dead bodies everywhere, and it appears that some people are actually eating them. Even the police have been overcome by the mass hysteria spreading across the mall." The screen split into two sections, and a male announcer in a smart suit and tie appeared on the right. "Are any efforts being made to quarantine the area?" Justin flipped to another channel. Carnage filled the screen. He flipped to another. This time, a serious-looking man with graying hair sat before them, his posture authoritative as he listened to the announcer's questions. On the bottom of the screen read, "Luke McCallum, MPH, Rosenberg School of Public Health." Earlier reports seemed to indicate that a suspicious-looking man broke a small vial and threw it on someone minutes before the chaos spread. "Do you have any theories on what was inside that vial?" "Right now, everything is speculation. But it seems to have been some type of virulent, unknown virus, judging by the rapid rate the symptoms are spreading." Amy tilted her head. "Justin, do you hear that?" Justin turned off the TV and listened. Seconds later, he said, "I can hear faint screams." Both went and stood before the window, gazing down at the street below. From their fourth-floor vantage point, they could see sections of the highway. Cars cramped bumper to bumper. Tiny forms of people could be seen abandoning their cars to run through the narrow gaps. Amy and Justin pressed their faces against the glass as the screams grew louder and hysterical people ran past the buildings. They were being chased by bloodied men and women, whose speed remained unhindered despite their jerky movements. One poor fellow who'd probably been on his way to work tripped and fell down hard on the pavement. As one, the mindless horde descended upon him, their clawing arms tearing into his clothes. Amy thought she saw something long and slimy being flung into the air, and she quickly shut her eyes, feeling the room spin at an alarming angle. The chaos had reached them. Chapter 2. Sit down. Put your head between your knees and take deep breaths. Amy heard Justin moving around in the kitchen. Seconds later, he returned with a glass of water. She lifted her head to give him a weak smile, then drank the water in greedy gulps, trying hard not to think about what she had just seen. None of it made sense. It was pure madness. The phone suddenly rang, causing them to jump. Justin immediately went over to pick it up. "Hello, Nana." "Yes, I'm fine. I haven't gone to my classes yet." He fell silent as he listened to his grandmother speak, then spoke again in a reassuring tone. "Amy and I are just going to stay in the apartment. We'll be fine. Don't worry." After another exchange of "we'll be fines" and "I love yous," he hung up the phone, looking worried. "Is she all right?" Amy asked. Justin nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so. But I could hear screams in the background." "Well, she's watching the news right now," she replied, trying to sound reasonable. "Yeah, that's probably it." But Justin still looked worried. They sat there, lost in their own thoughts and fears. What was happening? What was this virus? And why was it causing people to become mindless cannibals? And why was it spreading so fast? Fidgeting, Amy stood up and closed the curtains, a poor attempt to shut off the world outside. The apartment turned dark at once. Justin abruptly stood up and walked to the door. "Where do you think you're going?" Amy whispered fiercely. "I want to check on the neighbors," he said. "They might know more about what's going on." And before she could stop him, he quickly stepped out and closed the door. Dread filled Amy as she stared at the empty spot where Justin had stood a second ago. What if he didn't come back? How could he leave her alone like this? She tried to hold her tears back, but they flowed down her cheeks in hot streaks. Angrily, she wiped them away and went to the kitchen. Impulsively, she began yanking open the cabinet doors, and felt some relief when she saw cans of soup, frankfurters, and spaghetti stocked neatly next to the packaged ramen. It seemed Justin was still living on a college student's diet. This gave her an idea. She would separate the perishables from the non-perishables and take out all the food in the fridge that were past or nearing their expiration dates. If they couldn't go outside, they would need to ration their food until they could. Grateful that there was something to do, Amy hurried to the fridge and began sorting through the eggs, fresh vegetables, fruits, and dairy products. By the time she was done, Justin was still not back yet. Water, she suddenly thought. We'll need water. She went to the bathroom and filled the tub and sink to the brim. Next, she pulled out all the buckets and basins she could find and filled them as well. A small part of her felt ridiculous. She was behaving as if she were preparing for a war. There was nothing ridiculous about what you saw outside that window, she thought. It was better to be safe than sorry. With renewed determination, Amy filled several water bottles and placed them in the fridge. Just as she sat back down on the sofa, dull thuds sounded behind the door, followed by an exchange of fierce whispers. A scream pierced the hallway, and Justin and several other people came rushing into the apartment. "Lock the door," an elderly woman begged, and Justin hurried to comply. The scream changed into a gurgling noise as nails clawed desperately at the wall. Sounds of ripping clothes and other things Amy didn't want to know about filled her ears, and she clapped her hands over them in anguish. "Please, go away." Rapid, uneven footsteps shuffled across the hallway. It sounded like there was more than one person. The thin gap beneath the door suddenly turned dark, and remained that way for what seemed like an eternity. Something was blocking the hallway light from filtering in through the gap. A loud thud pounded on the door, and everyone jumped, startled. It sounded like someone had thrown himself bodily against the thick wood. The thud came again and again, a frenzied attack to knock the door down. And then it was over. The mindless attacker shuffled down the hallway, and quiet descended upon them once again. Yellow light from the hallway beamed through the thin gap below the door. Everyone stood there, practically holding their breaths. Once they were certain they were safe, Justin indicated that they should follow him to his study. They tiptoed behind him and entered the spacious room, settling down on the sofa or leaning against the wall. Amy sat down on Justin's leather chair and stared at the guests he had brought with him. In total, there were 5 people: the elderly woman who had spoken earlier, a young Asian couple, an older man in his 40s, and a kid who looked like he was 9 or 10 years old. And right at his feet was a dog. A silky terrier with black fur and brown paws. This meant there were 7 people in the apartment, plus a dog. There wasn't enough food and water for them all. That much Amy knew. Justin cast a harried glance over the new people. "Everyone, this is Amy, a close friend who's been staying with me for the past few days." He turned to Amy. "This is Ms. Wentworth, Mr. and Mrs. Park. That guy over there is Patrick, and the boy is Benson. He's 9 years old." After a pregnant pause, he added, "And the dog is Walter. He belongs to Benson." Murmured greetings were exchanged, smiles strained and tremulous. Justin closed the door to his study and leaned against the desk, rubbing his face tiredly. "Did you find out anything else?" Amy asked when silence fell across the room. "Afraid not," Justin replied, looking helpless. "I spoke to my brother on the phone earlier," Patrick chipped in. "It sounded like his neighborhood was affected too." The boy named Benson fidgeted. "Can I go back to my apartment now?" Dad said he'd only be gone for a minute. He's going to be so mad when he finds out I'm not there. Ms. Wentworth, her neck and fingers clad in cheap jewelry, bent forward to comfort the boy. No, he won't be mad. Did he say where he was going? Benson's bottom lip trembled. He said he was going downstairs to see what all the noise was about. Tears spilled over his lower lashes. My dad's okay, isn't he? I'm sure he is, Ms. Wentworth replied, her expression firm. But I want you and Walter to wait for him here, where it's safe. Will you do that? Benson nodded. He had no choice, as the infected were in the hallway. All of them were trapped inside the apartment. Chapter 3. The rest of the first day went by without any major mishaps. Just to be safe, they made a crude barricade against the living room door, consisting of a bookshelf positioned on top of Justin's desk. A couple of times they heard screams in the floors above theirs, but other than that, the rest of the day remained eerily silent. The TV stations were all down. Only one obscure radio station was still on the air, but the DJ sounded like he'd gone mad, mumbling about extinction and the dawn of a new species. He then went on a relentless tirade against the president and the government. Did you know that the government spent billions of dollars preparing a massive underground bunker specifically for this purpose? They knew this was coming. And how did they know? They were the ones who funded the research on this experimental virus. A perfect biological weapon, designed to wipe out an enemy nation within days. But what if this deadly weapon fell into the wrong hands? What then? The DJ's voice grew ominously soft. Well, we unfortunately know now. And as we suffer at the hands of their work, the government is comfortable and safe in the desert as they try to make a vaccine for their monstrous creation, while our elderly are bitten and torn into pieces, and our children are devoured by the runners. Justin reached out and turned the radio off. I think we've heard enough of his ramblings. He made his way to the kitchen. It's time for dinner anyway. Anyone care to join me? That went without saying. The group milled around the kitchen as Justin stirred Ken minestrone in a large pot and Mrs. Park sliced cucumbers, tomatoes, celery, and avocado for a salad. Amy spread ketchup and melted cheese over slices of bread to make mini pizzas. Once done, all of them sat around the island counter quietly eating their meals, eyeing one another surreptitiously in the thickening silence. Below the counter, Walter slurped the soup and then whined for a mini pizza. Justin tossed him half a slice, and the grateful dog gobbled it up in seconds. I know the DJ was raving, but do you think he might be right? Patrick suddenly asked. When all eyes were on him, he put his pizza back on the plate. It sounds like a plausible explanation to me. This infection couldn't have just come out of nowhere. Some crazed lunatic must have stolen this experimental virus and unleashed it on us. Do you think the whole country is infected? Mr. Park asked. He and his wife, both of whom were Koreans, had come to the United States a year ago to study English. They were 2 weeks shy of graduation. But now, they were stuck here like the rest of them, unable to return to their families. Maybe the entire world is infected, Ms. Wentworth said in an ominous tone. She stood up and put her empty plate in the sink. We don't know how this virus spreads. Does it spread through the air, saliva, or another method? If it's an airborne disease, then I would say that there is a high chance other countries are affected as well. Extinction. Dawn of a new species. Maybe the DJ wasn't that crazy after all. Having finished his meal, Benson knelt down to play with his dog. It doesn't spread through the air. He piped in as he rubbed Walter's furry chest. The runners bite you, and then you become a runner too. Everyone stopped what they were doing to stare at the boy. Are you sure? Justin asked. Did you actually see this happen? Benson nodded. I was standing on the balcony, watching the runners go after the people. One of them took a bite out of a woman. I thought she was dead, but then she got up and started running. His eyes twitched. She was moving kind of funny. No one had anything to say after that. It was a lot to process, and everything had happened so fast. Just this morning, Amy had been thinking about going to the beach. And now, she was stuck in this apartment with 5 strangers, while terror reigned just beyond that wooden door. Suddenly, she began to miss her mom terribly. She had never gotten on well with her mom, especially after she had remarried 3 years ago. Amy loathed her stepfather, whose elitist attitude always managed to sour her day. Why didn't you go to a better college? Why did you major in English literature? And the one that really peeved her off, I'm not surprised it didn't work out between you and Justin. He's a bit out of your league. The man was an insensitive bastard. So Amy had left home after college and rented a cramped, cockroach-infested apartment with a college friend. She hadn't visited or called her mom since. I'm sorry, Mom, you have no idea how much. And I hope you're okay. Please, please be okay. The sky was darkening outside. To their relief, the electricity was still working. 5 minutes after they turned on the lights, however, the banging started outside the door, furious body slams over and over again. Startled, Walter started barking, spittle spraying from his snout. As the slams worsened, the bookshelf toppled over and fell onto the floor. Justin and Mr. Park rushed over to push the shelf back against the door, striving to be as quiet as they could manage. Moving quickly, Mrs. Park wrapped her fingers around the dog's snout and carried its writhing body into Justin's study room. Ms. Wentworth, could you turn off the lights? Amy said. Nodding, the elderly woman did so, and instant darkness fell across the room. Seconds later, the banging abruptly stopped, and the shuffling noises went farther down the hallway. They stood there in the dark, breathing heavily. Once Amy felt calm enough, she went to the window and pulled apart the curtains. Moonlight filtered in through the ceiling-to-floor glass, giving them sufficient light to see. The rest of the group joined her and stared up at the full moon, finding comfort in its familiarity. What do we do now? Patrick asked. We can hardly see a thing in here without light. I have some candles, Justin replied, but he looked worried. They won't last very long, though. Ms. Wentworth waved her hand in a don't worry gesture. We'll worry about that when the time comes. Let's just get an early night, and we'll think about what to do tomorrow. That sounded like a good idea. Everyone was mentally and emotionally exhausted from the day's horrific events. Their minds hadn't even had time to process the gruesome realities they had seen with their eyes. Mrs. Park came out of the study, with Walter looking awfully comfortable in her arms. He's quiet now. With some training, he will be a good, obedient dog. He's a good dog, Benson protested. I trained him myself. Let's sort out the sleeping quarters. Ms. Wentworth, Mrs. Park, and Benson can sleep in my room. As for the rest, I think it's best if we sleep out here. We'll need to figure out how to strengthen our barricade. Justin's shoulders slumped. That was too close just now. If that thing had smashed its way in, we would all be dead by now. Or we might have turned into runners, Benson reminded him as he followed Mrs. Park into the room. Death had always seemed to be the worst thing that could ever happen to anyone. But now, there was something worse. A mindless cannibalistic entity that ran at a freakish speed, that fed on the human body with frenzied savagery. Amy would welcome death any day over that. Chapter 4. They had been in the apartment for only 4 days. But Amy sensed a shifting change taking place. Unlike the first day, Patrick was no longer as friendly as he had seemed. Also, he had started to hoard food. He took the bigger portions and sometimes snuck candies and chocolate bars into his pocket when he thought no one was looking. Ms. Wentworth was another unpleasant surprise. At first, Amy had appreciated the calming effect she'd had on the group. But now, she complained a lot about her health, and she'd even kicked Benson off Justin's bed, saying that she couldn't sleep because of him. Mrs. Park had gently led the boy back to the living room, trying to conceal her anger. It had been less than a week, but cordiality and human relationships were already starting to crack. Food was running out fast. When Amy had suggested lessening their food intake, Patrick had scoffed at the idea. "Don't be such a worrywart. We'll figure it out later." It was funny. That was the same thing Ms. Wentworth had said on the first day regarding the candles. Both of them weren't saying that now. Amy stood in the kitchen and stared at the trash can. Torn ramen packets and empty cans of beef stew, spaghetti, and peaches filled the can to the brim. On the floor lay a banana peel. There was still half a banana left inside. Fuming, Amy took it to the group hanging around the living room. She held up the banana peel and shook it. "Who threw this?" The group looked up at her. When Ms. Wentworth saw it, she smiled. "Oh, I did that. It was too bruised and soft for my liking. But it is still edible," Amy shouted. "We're not in a position to throw edible food away." Ms. Wentworth's face turned red. "How dare you speak to me in that tone? I don't know what kind of upbringing you had, but civilized people don't address the elderly that way." She closed her eyes and placed a hand over her heart. "I must go and lie down. This is enough excitement for my poor heart today." And she rose up and headed to Justin's room. Patrick threw a dirty look at Amy and went to join Ms. Wentworth. Amy could hear them whispering behind the bedroom door, no doubt saying terrible things about her subpar upbringing. Try as she might, she couldn't stop the tears seeping from her eyes. She whirled around and stomped back to the kitchen. "I'm sorry," Justin said behind her, and Amy felt his hands on her shoulders. "It was a mistake bringing so many people here. But it's done, so we have to try to get along. We have to go out and get supplies," she said, and Justin turned her around, his face incredulous. "Are you serious?" "Very," she answered. "I can die in here or die out there. The outcome's the same." The others had heard what she'd said. Mr. Park came over, looking scared. "You will turn into a runner." "No. You cannot go out." "Someone has to," Amy argued. "We're running out of food and water. We need medicine. And," she cast a quick glance at Mrs. Park, "we'll need feminine products." Justin took a step back, an awkward expression on his face. With a smile, Mrs. Park came to join them. "Our apartment has all of that. I also have morning pills. They should help." That was an idea. Instead of going outside, they could try to enter the neighboring apartments to get what they needed. Amy felt a surge of hope. "Where do you live? Which floor and number?" she asked. "The 4th floor. 2 doors to the left," Mr. Park answered. "It is close, but," he shook his head, "there are runners in the hallway. It is impossible to go out." Amy raised her brows. "Who says I'm going out into the hallway?" Justin stared at her, then looked horrified as realization dawned on him. "You are not going out on the balcony. That's a stupid plan. That only works in dreams." "I'm not climbing up or down. I'm going across." Looking fascinated by their discussion, Benson came up to them, Walter faithfully by his side. "What if there's a runner waiting for you in their apartment?" Mrs. Park shook her head. "I locked the door when we came out to speak to Justin. Our place will be empty." Amy rubbed her hands. "Then let's do it." "You're not going alone," Justin said, looking grim. "I'm going with you." "No, it is best if I do." Mr. Park smiled at Justin. "Since I know where everything is." Their plan was simple. Mr. Park would climb across first, since he had longer limbs. He would help Amy across. Rinse and repeat. "What if there's a runner in the next apartment?" Benson asked again, unwilling to let go of this subject. Justin thought for a second. "Troy Robinson lives next door, and I know he leaves for work around 6:30 every weekday. So his place should be locked." He nodded at Amy and Mr. Park. "You guys don't have to worry about that." They went out into the balcony. Mr. Park took off his shoes and socks, then climbed up and squatted on the railing. Balancing himself against the brick wall, he stretched his left leg slowly. Once it touched the adjacent railing, he hugged the wall and shifted his weight onto his left leg. He hopped off the railing and landed inside the neighbor's balcony. Turning, he waved Amy over with a grin on his face. He made it look so easy. But Amy had no time for that. She took off her slippers and positioned herself on the railing. "Catch me," she called out, and before Mr. Park could understand what she was saying, she jumped. It was a good thing that Mr. Park had fast reflexes. As soon as she jumped, he jerked forward and caught her around the waist. Amy winced as her foot banged against the neighbor's railing, but otherwise she was fine. Mr. Park staggered back, but managed to balance himself before they both fell. "Good catch," she breathed. "Do you have a first name, Mr. Park?" He smiled. "My English name is Daniel." "And your wife's name?" "She is Marie." "Awesome. Mind if I call you guys by your first names?" His smile broadened. "We would like it very much." They decided to check out the apartment. Daniel pushed the sliding door open and went in first. Amy immediately followed behind him, feeling a slight trepidation. She prayed that they were the only ones inside. She could smell rotten food and see flies buzzing around empty Chinese food cartons. "I wonder if there's food we can take with us," she whispered as she padded to the kitchen. Surely the previous tenant had some cans in his pantry. She was in luck. Boxes of soup packets lined the cupboard. Chicken noodle, French onion, creamy mushroom, and spring vegetable. There were unopened boxes of cereal as well. Amy pulled them all out and stuffed them into a large plastic bag she found near the sink. Daniel came out of the bedroom, holding rappelling rope in his hands. "I found this. I remember my wife told me that Troy likes rock climbing." "How did she know that?" Amy asked as she opened the fridge. Daniel gave a rueful smile. "I think he told her because he liked how she looks. Maybe he wanted to impress her." The fridge was mostly empty except for a carton of milk way past its expiration date. Amy opened the freezer door and found nothing there either. With a sound of annoyance, she slammed the door shut. "We'll look at his medicine cabinet and also take all the toilet paper we can find," she said. So far, the faucets were still working, but that would stop soon. They would need to take all the empty bottles and basins they could find and fill them with water. She mentioned this to Daniel. He looked at her, puzzled. "Why do we need to take them with us? Why can't we leave them here?" Briefly, Amy wondered if he was dense. She explained, using easier vocabulary. He was not amused. "My English is fine. I understood you. I think you misunderstood me." When she stared at him blankly, he sighed. "There are too many people in Justin's apartment. This apartment is empty. My apartment is empty. Why don't we stay here or at my place? I am sure my wife would like to sleep in her own bed." Amy slapped a hand on her forehead. "You are a freaking genius, you know that? That makes perfect sense." Also, she would do anything to get away from Patrick and Ms. Wentworth. Daniel unraveled the rope. "We can tie this across the balconies. Use them for balance. Why don't we break up some furniture and form some kind of bridge between the balconies?" Amy paused to think, then suggested, "What about a bookshelf? The wooden boards are nice and flat." They were ideas worth trying. They hurried back out into the balcony and told Justin their plans. He seemed tentatively hopeful. "That's great. We could try to connect the apartments that way. We could even try to make a rope ladder. That way, we can climb down to the third and second floors and see if the people there are okay." For the first time, they had something to do. Something to move them forward. Amy looked at the cereal boxes and soup packets, deciding to leave them where they were. Knowing Patrick and Ms. Wentworth, they would finish them in days. They had to save the non-perishables for as long as they could. Chapter 5. For the next couple of days, Justin and Daniel unscrewed the bookshelves and placed the boards between the balcony railings. They lashed the ends with rope to give them more stability. Next, they took all the wooden hangers they could find, particularly the ones with a strong, slightly curved shape to them, and used them as rungs for their makeshift rope ladder. Daniel tested them, pressing his weight down on the rungs. To their surprise, the ladder was sturdier than they had expected. When Amy announced that she and a few others were moving to the next apartment, Patrick complained the loudest. "We have to stick together," he insisted. "It's too dangerous to break up into smaller groups." Of course, Amy knew the real reason why he was saying this. If they left, it meant that he would have to fend for himself from now on. And he had no intention of being stuck with Ms. Wentworth, who would only be a liability. "It's too crowded in here," Amy answered. "Also, it's good to have several places prepared just in case something happens to Justin's apartment. We'll come in here often to check on you." Patrick darted a look at Ms. Wentworth, who looked displeased by the whole thing. "What about food? There's only a can of chicken soup left." "And whose fault is that?" Amy wanted to say, but she pressed her lips together and nodded at the small plastic bag she had placed on the island counter. "You'll find more canned goods in there. There's a box of cereal, unopened, and I've added a loaf of bread as well. It's a bit moldy, but you can pick those parts out. It's completely edible." Ms. Wentworth crossed her arms. "We can't be sure that you aren't hoarding all the food for yourselves." She glared at Patrick. "I want you to go with them and see how much food they have. The food has to be divided equally. I won't just sit by and watch while you kids slowly starve us to death." Justin nodded. "That's fine. Patrick, we're leaving now, so you can come with us now if you'd like." And he made his way to the balcony. After some hesitance, Patrick followed him out. He put his foot up, then paused. His face was ashen. "I changed my mind. I'll just stay here." The man was afraid of heights. Without a word, Daniel crossed over, walking on the wooden board. Once he jumped off and landed in the next balcony, he turned around and motioned for Benson to come over. "Look at me, Benson. Do not look down." Benson took a step back. "What if I fall?" "You won't," Justin said, lifting the boy up. "Just walk in a straight line and don't look down. If you do that, you'll be fine." Once Benson set foot on the board, he scurried across in a second and launched himself at Daniel, who caught him easily. The boy cheered as Daniel set him down. "Hey, that was fun." Next, Marie hugged Walter to her chest and cautiously climbed onto the board. The dog whined softly as its huge brown eyes gazed up at her. With a comforting smile, Marie patted Walter's head and hugged him closer. Justin leaned over the balcony, his eyes narrowed. "We're starting to attract some of the runners. Let's speed this up." Below, a bloodied woman stared up at them, her mouth wide open. She threw herself against the building, scrabbling to gain purchase with her ravaged fingers. Farther in the distance, several more runners, attracted by the scene of people congregating on the balcony, came running toward the building. Their speed unnerved Amy as she watched them. Walter started barking at the female runner below, and Marie wrapped her fingers around his snout. "Quiet," she commanded, even as he barked through his muffled snout, his furry body jerking with the effort. On shaking legs, Marie hurried across the board and handed Walter over to Daniel as she climbed down from the railing. Daniel gave a quick hug to his wife before setting the dog down. "Your turn," Justin said to Amy as he picked her up around the waist. She placed her feet on the board and righted herself as she stood up. He gazed up at her. "I'll be right behind you." "Okay." Taking a deep breath, she wobbled her way across the board, trying not to look at the runners below, but her eyes were drawn to them in morbid fascination. One of the taller ones actually scrabbled high enough to touch the railing on a first-floor balcony. Alarmed, Amy jumped off the board and landed beside the Parks. In seconds, Justin came over and joined them. The group looked over at Patrick and Ms. Wentworth, who stood on the other side with fear plastered on their faces. Ms. Wentworth peered over the balcony, her terrified gaze on the runners. "You can't abandon us like this. How can you be so heartless?" she cried out. "No one's abandoning anyone," Justin said. "And Ms. Wentworth, please lower your voice. The runners seem to be attracted to our presence and noise." He was absolutely right. The sooner they entered the apartments, the better it would be for all of them. "We'll come and visit you tomorrow," Amy added, hoping that was enough to calm her down. Then she turned to Patrick. "Take care of Ms. Wentworth. And both of you, try to stay as quiet as possible. You don't want a runner to start slamming against your door." This reminder silenced them faster than any promises to return. Muttering to themselves, Patrick and Ms. Wentworth returned back inside and slid closed their balcony door. Justin turned and smiled at the Parks. "Do you want to stay back a bit? Or do you want to go to your apartment now?" "We will go now," Daniel answered. He gazed at his wife, who was fussing over Benson. Judging by Marie's maternal display, there was no question that the boy and his dog would be going with them. "There is work to do. I must make some kind of barricade against the front door." It was a good idea. After promising to meet up the next day, each couple went into their apartments. Amy and Justin padded into the living room and plopped down on a sofa, letting out a collective sigh. It was nice to have space and quiet once again. "Do you want to eat an early dinner before we start work on our own barricade?" Justin asked, tilting his head at Amy. She nodded. Daniel had given them extra cans of food from their own pantry, including a can of peaches. They decided to have that for dessert as they opened up 2 cans of spaghetti and meatballs for dinner. As they sat down to eat, a comfortable silence fell between them, and a small smile formed on Amy's lips as she twirled a soft spaghetti strand around her fork. It was nice to eat without having to constantly feel Patrick's and Ms. Wentworth's greedy eyes on her food. Once they cleared their table, they got down to work. They moved a large armoire into the living room and positioned it right in front of the door. Justin did most of the heavy lifting, which meant it took over a half hour to do what 2 men could have accomplished in 15 minutes or less. Amy murmured an apology as soon as they were done. "No worries," Justin replied, grinning as he wiped the sweat from his brow. "But you'll have to clean Troy's apartment tomorrow. The place is a mess." "That's fair." After faltering for a bit, she asked, "What are we going to do about sleeping arrangements? Who gets the bedroom?" "We'll take turns." He plopped down on the sofa and pulled off his sweaty t-shirt. "I'll sleep on the couch tonight." They weren't dating anymore, but Amy didn't like the idea of sleeping alone in a stranger's king-size bed, especially now with everything that had happened. She wondered if she should say something, then thought better of it. It could quickly get awkward for both of them. She turned around and headed toward the bedroom. "I'll talk to you tomorrow. Good night." Once she settled into Troy's bed, she lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hisses and snarls filling the evening air outside the window. It sounded as though there were dozens of runners just milling about, waiting for fresh prey to stumble into their midst. Amy shut her eyes and curled into a fetal position. Were there many people left? Or had most succumbed to the cannibalistic runners? Had her mom succumbed to them as well? Cool air hit her legs, and the mattress squeaked as a heavy body plopped down behind her. Startled from her thoughts, Amy looked over her shoulder to find Justin snuggling under the duvet. He quickly spooned her, placing his lips against her ear. "I hope you don't mind, but it's a bit lonely out there," he admitted. "If you want me to leave, just say the word." In reply, Amy pulled his arm closer around her and pressed her back against him. With a contented sigh, she closed her eyes and blocked out all the extraneous noise that had kept her awake. Her sole focus now was the sound of Justin's soft breathing and the way it tickled her ear with each exhale. Sleep came to her instantly. Chapter 6. Just as Amy had promised, the group gathered at Justin's apartment to check on Patrick and Ms. Wentworth. Marie remained in her apartment to watch over Benson and Walter. By Daniel's account, it seemed they were getting along quite nicely. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case with Patrick and Ms. Wentworth. The old lady listed off her grievances, her chest heaving with dry sobs. "All I had was half a can of lukewarm chicken soup last night. Patrick ate everything. Everything. The man is insatiable. I'm still a young man. I need the energy," Patrick said fiercely. "Just be glad that you're here with me. If you had been alone in your apartment, you'd already be dead by now." Ms. Wentworth wept into her hands. I feel so weak and dizzy. We need more food. She was right, Amy thought. Food was running out fast and they had to procure more. But from where? We could go to Papa's, she said. Papa's was a mom-and-pop grocery on their street. Daniel frowned at her as Justin shook his head vehemently. Don't be stupid, he said. It's not just risky, it's a crazy mission. Daniel agreed with him. Let's try the other apartments first. Why don't we try the one below us? There was no harm in trying. Besides, it was high time to put their makeshift ladder to good use. Justin decided to climb down first, followed by Daniel. Amy would go last. Are you sure you won't join us? Justin asked Patrick as the small group moved to the balcony. Patrick turned pale. I'll pass. I have acrophobia. So what? Amy snapped. Surely you don't expect us to continue bringing food to you. Justin shot her a warning glance, but she ignored him and turned to address Patrick and Ms. Wentworth. It's time we all helped each other. That means both of you have to start pitching in. If you don't, you're just a burden to us. Ms. Wentworth's hand moved to her chest, but Amy pounced on her. Don't even think about mentioning your health. That's no longer an excuse. What can I do, dear? The old woman asked, on the verge of tears. Do you expect me to climb over balconies and help you steal our neighbor's food? That's absurd. For starters, Amy replied, gritting her teeth, you can help by rationing your food. We are all hungry. We are all weak. But we can't afford to eat like there's no tomorrow, understand? Without waiting for a reply, Amy stepped over to the railing and motioned for Daniel to join her. Let's tie the rope ladder here. Justin came and stood beside her. I know you're upset, but... But what? She whirled around to face him. But what, Justin? Do you see the world before you? It's every man and woman for themselves now. If they don't start pulling their weight, they're useless to us. Justin remained silent after that, because everything she'd said was the truth. He stared at her, then nodded in resignation. All right, we'll discuss this later. Right now, let's just get this done with. They tied the end of the rope ladder to the railing and dropped its length down. It reached all the way to the second floor. Justin took a deep breath and smiled at Amy and Daniel. Let's do this. He put a leg over the railing and carefully placed his foot on a wooden rung. He was about to put his entire weight on it when the ladder suddenly jerked away from him. He leaned precariously over the railing, his arms flailing, but luckily, Daniel grabbed his t-shirt and yanked him back in. Heart thudding, Amy leaned over and gasped when she saw a pale beefy arm shaking the rope ladder from the third floor. The apartment below theirs was not so empty after all. Chapter 7. Is it a runner? Daniel asked breathlessly, staring at the arm. As soon as the question fell from his lips, the ladder stopped shaking, and a head popped over the third-floor balcony. Wary dark eyes stared up at them, which turned to relief at the sight of the three young people. You folks gave me quite a scare. For a while, I thought it was one of those cannibals trying to climb down the ladder. When they remained silent, the man smiled. Come on down. I made some scrambled eggs and hot coffee. It's powdered egg, but what the heck? Still tastes pretty good. Scrambled eggs. They hadn't had that in a while. Justin climbed down like an agile acrobat, and Daniel and Amy followed in quick succession. When they stood in the man's living room, their mouths fell open as they stared at the barricade blocking the door. It looked as if the man had moved every piece of furniture he could get his hands on. A wooden TV cabinet, a teenage girl's pale pink cupboard, a heavy-duty metal desk, a leather sofa, the list was endless. There was no way a runner was getting into this apartment through that door. The man smiled sheepishly. Yeah, I got a bit carried away. But it helps me sleep at night. He introduced himself as Garrett as he spooned eggs onto 4 plates. A pot of coffee sat on a portable single burner, and Amy closed her eyes and breathed in the fragrance. It had been a while since they'd had a steaming pot of anything. Garrett was a high school PE teacher in his late 40s, a burly man with salt and pepper hair who enjoyed traveling around in his camper van. His 17-year-old daughter, who was bound for college in a few months, was at a nearby summer camp as a camp volunteer. He'd lost touch with her about a week ago. "I told her I'd come and get her," he explained as he shoveled eggs into his mouth. "And I will as soon as I figure out how to reach my camper van." "Where will you go once you find your daughter?" Justin asked. Garrett smiled. "I have a friend who owns a small farm out west. The place is fairly isolated. The closest neighbor lives about half a mile away." He chuckled. The man is a fanatic. Always believed that the world would end soon. He spent years building a massive bunker underneath his house and stocked it with all kinds of canned goods, bottled water, water treatment tablets, blankets, medical supplies, portable propane gas stoves, standby generators, you name it, he's got it. I thought he was nuts. He shook his head slowly. I can't believe he had it right all this time. Amy exchanged a glance with Justin, then asked, "Would your friend be open to the idea of letting a few more people in? If the place is as isolated as you say, maybe we can help him build strong fences around the farm to keep the runners out." Runners? That's an interesting name. Garrett stood up and placed his plate in the sink, pausing to think. "Well, I suppose you can come with me and then ask him when we get there. Right now, I don't even know if he'll take me in. But we've got to try, right?" Once they finished their meals, Garrett poured more coffee for his guests and then moved to the balcony to sit on a folding chair. The others followed him outside. He sat there, staring at a couple of runners milling about on the street a short distance away. "What do you think happened? Any ideas?" he asked, tearing his gaze away to look at his guests. "Some say that our government was experimenting with a dangerous virus, while others say it was a lone terrorist attack." Justin shrugged. "Your guess is as good as ours." Amy leaned against the railing, staring at the stray runners. "I wonder where the government's secret bunker is located. That crazy DJ said it was in a desert somewhere." "If it does exist, good luck finding it," Garrett said in a gruff tone. "But I wouldn't waste time doing something like that." "Hey, is that coffee I smell?" a voice called out from above. Patrick leaned over the balcony, his face pinched with fear. Daniel popped his head over the railing to look up at him. "Yes, we are having coffee." He didn't offer any, which made sense to Amy. It wasn't his to offer after all. "Well, make sure to bring us some when you return, okay? We would like some too." And he disappeared back into the apartment, judging by the sound of the glass door sliding shut. Garrett raised a brow. "You kids aren't the only ones?" Justin shook his head. "2 more in my apartment, and 2 more in Daniel's apartment. Including a dog." "A dog?" Garrett rubbed his face with his hands. "Geez. Well, what about the rest? Are they all able men and women?" Justin and Amy exchanged glances before replying. "We have 1 elderly woman and a 9-year-old boy," Justin said. Garrett shifted in his chair. "Do you have enough food to go around?" "It's been okay so far," Amy said. "But we're running out fast." A pause, then she added, "We're thinking of visiting Papa's, the mom-and-pop grocery on the street." Justin sighed. "I thought we agreed that it was too dangerous to go outside." "That's not an option, Amy." Garrett seemed to be of a different opinion. "Now, hang on. We have to consider all of our options. Your girlfriend's right, food's running out fast, and we need to do what we can to make sure we don't starve. We can't stay in our apartments forever, you know." "The runners are too fast," Daniel said. "How can we outrun them? They will chase us into the store. And they will slam against the door until it breaks." Silence fell as their eyes turned to gaze at the runners on the street. Right now, they were tame, shuffling along with no apparent destination in their diseased minds. But once they zeroed in on a normal human, all hell would break loose. There was no way to outrun their freakish speed. "We'll need weapons," Garrett said at last. "I have a rifle, an AR-15. I sometimes go hunting with my friend whenever I have time. We could also use steak knives, baseball bats, walking canes, golf clubs, hammers, whatever we can get our hands on. Justin didn't look convinced. Okay, let's say we're doing this. We might be able to fight off 1, maybe 2 runners. But what if there's a horde of them? There's no way we'll survive that. Distractions. That's what we need. Also, one of us can sit here and shoot down any runner that comes too close. Garrett squinted at Amy. Ever shot with a rifle before? Amy shook her head. I don't have any experience with guns. Never held one in my life. Garrett shrugged. That's okay. I could teach you. You could, but that doesn't mean I'll suddenly become an expert shooter, Amy replied. There's no way I'd be able to kill anything that moves so fast. He nodded. Then what will you do? Go with the others. I mean, this whole thing was my idea, she said, a little annoyed. Besides, I'm a fast runner. I used to be in my high school track team. Garrett looked interested. Which event? Relay, she said. I was the final leg runner. Daniel shuffled his feet, uneasy. We must discuss this with the others. Garrett, can you visit us this evening? We will have dinner together, and then we can make plans. That sounds like a good idea. Justin grabbed the rope ladder dangling in front of them. Garrett, we'll be waiting for you in my apartment. It's the one right above yours. And I'll leave the ladder where it is. Don't leave just yet, Garrett said as he stood up. I believe you have a coffee delivery to make. About 5 minutes later, he returned with 2 thermos flasks and a plastic bag filled with cans and packs of reconstituted meals. Amy stared at them, astonished. Garrett smiled. My daughter Lily and I love camping, especially at the Forest Valley campsite. We take our camper van, stock it with all kinds of ready-made meals, and have fun canoeing by day and watching the stars by night. He held up the bag. These are some of the meals left over from our last trip. Are you sure? Justin asked, hesitant. It's a lot of food. Don't worry about it, Garrett said with a dismissive wave of his hand. There's plenty for me still. Besides, if our mission to Papa's is successful, I can just restock my pantry. They murmured their thanks and readied themselves to climb the ladder. Garrett stood next to them. The blue flask is for the kid. It's Coco. He gave them a wide grin and rubbed his hands together. I'll see you folks tonight. Can't wait. With returning smiles, the group climbed up the ladder one at a time. Chapter 8. Everyone cleaned up as best as they could and gathered in Justin's apartment. When Justin introduced Garrett to Marie, Benson, Patrick, and Ms. Wentworth, the elderly woman grabbed the burly man's arm and thanked him profusely for the food. She darted accusatory glances at Patrick even as she continued to thank the man. They sat down and had reconstituted seafood chowder and baked beans under dull candlelight. Walter slurped at his own bowl of chowder and crushed plain crackers. Everyone was smiling, and the atmosphere was one of neighborly cheer as each pointedly ignored the strange groans and hisses rising in the dark street below. After dinner, Ms. Wentworth wiped her mouth with a wad of toilet paper. What a lovely meal that was. I actually feel full tonight. She smiled at Garrett. My dear, you are a lifesaver. You are welcome into our home at any time. Amy piled up the bowls and went into the kitchen. Marie joined her, Walter tagging along at her feet. Daniel told me you are going to go to Papa's. Marie's face was pinched with worry. Is this true? Amy nodded. I know it's risky, but Garrett's going to help us. He has a rifle. He said he sometimes hunts, so I'm guessing he's pretty good with it. Silence fell between them as Marie opened and closed her mouth several times. After a while, an odd look of determination came into the petite woman's eyes. I will go with you. Amy shook her head vehemently. You have to stay with Benson. Marie continued on, as though she hadn't heard Amy. I am small and fast. You and I will run into the shop while Justin, my husband, and Patrick fight with the runners near us. Garrett can shoot from the balcony. She nodded to herself. Yes, I think this might work. That's quite a plan, Garrett said as he came up to them. He had heard everything. With a start, Amy and Marie whirled around to face him. He smiled as he crossed his arms. I'm impressed. Are you sure you want to do this? The two women mutely stared at one another, then nodded in reply. That's a lot of people, Patrick said, his voice shaking. Surely you don't need 3 men to be down there with you. On the contrary, Ms. Wentworth said tartly. They will need all the help they can get. Garrett slapped his hands together. That's settled then. Now that our bellies are full, let's talk about how we're going to do this. They pulled up a few more chairs and sat in the living room. Garrett mentioned his camper van and his plan to go to his friend's farm after he found his daughter. He invited his new friends to join him. Patrick's and Ms. Wentworth's eyes lit up. The elderly woman clapped her hands in delight. What a wonderful idea! I've always wanted to live on a farm. The scenery, the fresh air, the lack of noise pollution. We're not going there for a fun weekend, Amy interrupted. If Garrett's friend allows us into his bunker, we'll have to pitch in and work. No work means no food and shelter. That's the way it goes. Patrick's face turned ugly. No one appointed you leader, so don't tell us what to do. You just sit there like a good girl and shut up. Hey, Garrett said, raising his hand. He looked alarmed. What's going on here? Amy knew exactly what was going on. Up until now, Patrick had been careful with his words as he and Ms. Wentworth had depended on her and Justin to provide all the food and immediate necessities. But now that Garrett was here, they were quickly latching on to him. Garrett was older, a leader, someone with a plan. He would be the one to take care of them, be responsible for them. He would lead them out of the city. The smirk on Patrick's face said it all. I don't need you kids anymore. Amy gave a fake smile. It's nothing. Patrick was just letting out a little pent-up steam. We've all been stressed being cooped up like this. Patrick remained silent, but his smirk lingered on his lips. Garrett's head swiveled to the left and right, looking at Amy and Patrick. Once he realized what was going on, his features hardened. If you want to come with me, you'd better get along. We don't have time for fights. He paused, then added pointedly, Amy's right. Each one of you had better start pulling your weight. I know my friend. He won't allow any pampered fools to eat his food and take up room on his farm, that's for sure. Garrett's words wiped the smirk off Patrick's face. Seeing this, Ms. Wentworth cleared her throat. I can knit very well. I'm also an excellent cook and baker. If your friend has fresh vegetables and fruit, I can make pies and casseroles. For the first time, she looked cowed. I may be old, but I wouldn't be a burden to you or your friend. Garrett smiled reassuringly. I believe you. I was just speaking in general. Now, let's talk about how we're going to do this. They decided that they would go to Papa's first. The women would quietly climb down, after which the men would quickly follow. Silence was paramount, as the runners seemed highly attuned to sound and sight. The men would form a barricade around the women, making sure that they reached the shop safely. Once there, Amy and Marie would stock their bags with as many non-perishable items as they could fit in. They would be the first to climb back up the ladder, and the men would follow later. If the situation gets dicey, I'll have to start shooting at the runners, Garrett said. It'll get loud. When this happens, you'd better move like there's a runner snapping right at your heels. We don't want to see you trapped as a horde of them descends on you. How do we kill them? Daniel asked. Do we stab them in the heart? That's for vampires, Benson piped in, disapproving. You got to treat the runners like psychos. When the adults stared at him blankly, he made a face. The runners are crazy, right? Their brains are messed up. So smash the head. They'll go down for good. Justin nodded slowly. That makes sense. Their infected brains are controlling their behavior. If we destroy their brains, then there's nothing left to control their actions anymore. So, when do we do this? Patrick asked, trying to sound calm. When's the best time? Good question. Garrett paused to think, then said, I've noticed that they tend to become more active at night. Around noon, however, there aren't a lot of them on the street. Everyone agreed that noon was the best time to do this. Feeling tentatively optimistic, they shifted their discussion to the camper van. The gas is full, so there's no worry there, Garrett told them. And we can stop by at gas stations and fill up when we need to. We'll stock the mini kitchen with the canned goods from Papa's. That way, we won't starve along the way. Is your camper van in the basement parking lot? Daniel asked. Garrett nodded. After you return from Papa's, we'll take the stairs down to the basement floor. We'll do this a day later to give ourselves a bit of a breather. Ms. Wentworth's hand clutched at her bosom. But the runners in the hallway? Coming face to face with a runner or two in the hallway will be a piece of cake after what they'll face on the street, Garrett interrupted. He smiled kindly. This is something we have to do sooner or later. There's no point in delaying the inevitable. It was already close to midnight. As Garrett prepared to leave, he turned around to address them once more. Grab whatever weapon you can find. Something long and sharp will be perfect. Kitchen knives? Patrick asked hopefully. Benson made another face. You'll get their blood on you. What if you become a runner from that? That was another problem they hadn't considered. We still don't know how this infection spreads, Justin noted. It's pretty certain it's not airborne, otherwise we would all be infected. So it's probably transmitted through bites or fluids. We have to avoid getting the blood in our eyes or mouths, Amy said with conviction. Also, I think we should put plastic wrap around our exposed arms and legs just in case. If we get bitten, we're pretty much a goner anyway. But if it's just blood that splatters on us, at least the plastic will make most of it slide right off. Garrett nodded in approval. It's worth a try. He made his way to the balcony. Everyone, get a good night's sleep. We're going to Papa's tomorrow. Everyone stopped in their tracks to stare at Garrett, shocked by this announcement. Patrick took several steps back, shaking his head. It's too soon, he said, his voice panicked. We need time to prepare ourselves. We need time. We'll never be prepared for something like this. If we delay what needs to be done, our fear will only grow worse with each day. By the end, we'll have found an elaborate reason why we shouldn't be doing this at all, Garrett shot back. No one had a rebuttal to that. When no answer was forthcoming, Garrett again made his way to the balcony and threw one leg over the railing. He paused to look at the group. Get some rest, he said with a quick smile. It's going to be a hectic day tomorrow. Chapter 9. Amy was aware of just how ridiculous they looked, but no one was laughing. Patrick was the worst of them. He had stolen Justin's swimming goggles to protect his eyes. Coupled with plastic wrap around his arms and legs, he looked like a shiny, humanoid robot. He wielded his long kitchen knife like someone had snuck in at night and replaced his fingers with fat sausages. Amy and Marie stood there holding large, empty sacks. Justin had a baseball bat, and Daniel held an iron fire poker with a wickedly sharp point at one end. Amy was surprised. There's a fireplace in your apartment? An electric fireplace stove, he explained. Winter is very cold here, but there is no underfloor heating in the apartment. We are not used to that. Justin gave him an approving glance. That's a formidable weapon. Be careful that you don't poke your own eye out. They moved to the balcony and stared out into the street. The afternoon sun hung in the clear sky, high and blinding, and Amy thought with some irony, it's another perfect day for the beach. The barrel of Garrett's rifle popped over the balcony below theirs. His cheerful voice called out, "You kids ready?" "Sure," Justin replied, but Amy could tell he was lying. His face was pale as he looked at her. "Who's going down first?" "I am," Amy said quickly before Marie could say anything. She climbed over the railing and gently placed a foot on a wooden rung. Last night, Justin had extended the ladder so that its length reached the first floor. From there, they had to dangle off the railing and jump to the ground. Amy prayed the second and first floor apartments were empty. "Here goes," she said with a bright smile that belied her fear. As she climbed down, she saw Garrett give her the thumbs up. "I've got your back, but try to be quiet. And stay low." Her lips numb, Amy could only nod as she went past him and dropped to the first floor. She quickly looked around for signs of movement, then popped her head over the railing to give Justin the okay sign. He smiled down at her. When she landed on the soft grass, she immediately crouched down and scanned wildly about her. The street was empty. Above her, she saw Marie climb down slowly, then land on the first floor. She didn't even bother to dangle from the railing. She jumped, then rolled as soon as she landed on her feet. With a smile, she stood up and joined Amy. The men climbed down in quick succession. Patrick, the last one to join them, pressed himself against the building. "I can't do this," he whimpered. "I'm going back up." "We stick together," Justin whispered, staring at the older man. "Now move." The group crouched and ran along the street, their eyes roving in all directions. When they stepped into the street, Patrick made a strangled noise and pulled the goggles down over his eyes. A runner was standing a short distance away, next to a van. One of his arms was missing, and something swung from his gaping abdomen as he ran toward them, snarling. "Too fast," Amy thought as they began to run. Daniel turned around, holding his fire poker out, when the runner lunged at him. Daniel's reaction was instant. He held the poker up higher, and in an instant, the runner ran its neck through the long piece of iron and came close enough to take a bite out of Daniel's shiny outstretched arm. Before it could do that, a baseball bat came crashing down on its head, halting its progress. Justin placed a foot against the runner's chest and pushed it away. It slumped to the ground and remained still. "Is it dead?" Marie whispered, shaking. "Yeah, I think so." Justin nudged the runner with his blood-stained bat. Its dead eyes stared up at the blazing sun. Unfortunately, luck was not on their side. Seconds later, they were spotted by two runners. They snarled as they ran toward the group with jerky movements. "Go. We'll take care of this," Justin said. Not wasting a second, Amy grabbed Marie's arm, her fingers sticking on the plastic wrap as they ran to the shop at the end of the street. She didn't stop to look back. As soon as they fell through the entrance, they slid shut the security grill. Once they were sure that they were alone, they began making their way down the aisles, grabbing canned meats, vegetables, stews, pasta, and fruits, along with dry packaged meals. They grabbed anything that looked like aspirin and threw in bottled water into their full sacks. When they could fit no more, they lugged the sacks to the entrance, threw the grill open, and peered outside. Daniel saw them and came running. He reached out to grab Marie's sack, then paused briefly to gaze into his wife's eyes. "There are a lot of runners coming this way. Do not look back. Just run." Nodding, Marie grabbed his fire poker as he hefted the sack over his shoulder. Amy did the same, and they bolted out into the street. There was blood on Justin's cheek. Patrick was nowhere to be seen. When Amy reached him, she cried out, "Whose blood is that?" "It's not mine," he answered as he ran with them. "It's from a runner." "Did it get in your eyes?" She wanted to ask, but the snarls and hisses grew closer. It sounded like there were dozens of runners gaining on them. Amy gasped loudly when she felt a cracked nail scrape down the back of her head. When she jerked her head forward, there was the sound of a crackling shot, and she felt something warm spray on her neck. Unable to help it, she looked back and saw a runner fall down behind her, half of its face gone. In a moment of madness, she wondered if the blood would leave a permanent stain on her food sack. "Run faster!" Justin shouted. He reached out to grab Amy's sack and tossed her the bat. Several more shots sounded above their heads, adding to the commotion. They were almost there. Just a few more seconds. Garrett began picking the runners off one by one. Except for two misses, all the shots were right on target. This gave the group crucial seconds to reach safety. Bending his legs, Daniel interlaced his fingers to form a foothold for Marie. When she put her foot in it, he boosted her up with a grunt and looked up, making sure that she could reach the first-floor railing. Beside them, Justin did the same for Amy. Once the women had safely crawled over and fallen into the balcony, Justin did the same for Daniel. The hair-raising sounds of hisses, snarls, and intermittent gunshots drew dangerously close. The runners would be on Justin any second now. "Justin!" Amy screamed. His eyes frantic, Daniel quickly spoke to his wife in Korean, and then leaned over the railing. Marie grabbed her husband's legs, straining with the effort. Amy hurried over to help the poor woman. Amy didn't know if Justin was brave or just plain stupid. Instead of grabbing Daniel's outstretched hands, he hefted up the sacks over his head. "Take them first," he shouted. Wordlessly, Daniel grabbed the tied ends and swung the sacks over his head. Amy ducked when they flew at her, but one sack still managed to hit her left shoulder. She fell backward as large cans rolled out of one of the split sacks. Another crackling shot filled the air. Then another. But the runners had come too close. The nearest one was only about 20 feet away. Justin leaped and grabbed Daniel's hands, causing the man to lean dangerously over the railing. At this rate, both men would topple to the ground and become food for the ravenous runners. Marie cried out and yanked on her husband's pants, muttering something in her native tongue. Seeing this, Amy jumped up and wrapped her arms around Daniel's torso. She pulled hard, praying that they would make it. To everyone's relief, Justin managed to pull one leg over the railing. With a concerted effort, he threw himself over and landed in the balcony with a dull thud. Amy rushed over to him, checking to make sure he was all right. They were all alive. She couldn't believe it. A veiny hand suddenly clamped on the railing, its long, cracked fingernails caked with dried blood. Marie shrieked and stepped back just as Amy picked up the baseball bat and slammed it over the fingers, crushing them. The runner fell back, but immediately got up on its feet. With a snarl, it jumped again, trying to reach the first-floor railing like it had before. "We are not safe yet," Daniel said, his face drawn and pale. "We must leave before one of them succeeds and climbs over this railing." "You kids all right?" Garrett called out, leaning over his balcony. His eyes were filled with worry. "Yes, we're all fine, Garrett," Amy said. "Could you let down a rope? We'll tie the sacks so that you can pull them up." Her gaze wandered over to the other apartment building across from theirs. She could see a few faces peeping out of the windows to look at them, their expressions shocked and frightened. It made Amy realize just how crazy their actions had been. Though the whole idea had been hers, she vowed never to willingly put her friends and herself in such danger again. Chapter 10. Once everyone had reached Justin's apartment safely, they stood in the living room, the sacks of food lying on the floor. Amy noticed Ms. Wentworth's eyes light up when she spied a can of seafood bisque peeping out from a sack. Slowly, Amy went and stood in front of the sacks, blocking the elderly woman from the view. She spoke quietly. "Understand this. We risked our lives to get this food. We almost died out there." Her gaze landed on Ms. Wentworth and Patrick. "So don't think that you can eat whatever you want, whenever you want. You eat what we give you, and I don't want to hear your complaints." Garrett raised a fist to his mouth, trying to hide his smile. Amy stared at Patrick. "How could you desert us like that?" All eyes fixed on him, and he became nervous when he realized no one was on his side. "I panicked, okay?" he cried out. "There were so many of them running at us. What could I do with a measly knife? So I ran back and Garrett let down the rope. I climbed up to the first floor, and then used the ladder to get back to my apartment." Benson looked up. "This isn't your apartment," he said, his tone disapproving. "It belongs to Justin." "Let the adults talk, honey," Ms. Wentworth said with a forced smile. "It's rude to talk back to people older than you. Why don't you take your mutt and go play in the bedroom?" This interaction greatly displeased Marie. She came up and put a consoling arm around the boy. "Please don't treat Benson like that. He is a good boy, and he has been very helpful to all of us." Without waiting for an answer, she turned to address Amy and Justin. "We will return to our apartment now. You can decide what to do with the food." Justin shook hands with Daniel. "I want to say thank you. You saved my life just now." "We saved each other," he answered with a genuine smile. "I will see you tomorrow." When they left, Amy pointedly ignored Ms. Wentworth and Patrick and turned to Garrett. "One of the sacks is for the camper van. We'll divide the food from the second sack and make sure that each person gets an equal portion." "Are you insane?" Patrick blurted out. "Do you honestly think that a 9-year-old boy should get the same amount of food that a grown man gets?" Garrett crossed his arms. "If you have a problem with it, maybe you'd like to go out and get your own food." This promptly shut the man up, but his outburst raised an interesting thought. Amy looked at Ms. Wentworth. "I seem to recall that Patrick ate all the food last time, leaving you with only a can of chicken soup." "Half a can, dear," Ms. Wentworth corrected at once. She glared at Patrick. But he still complained and said he was hungry. Justin disappeared for several seconds, then reappeared later, holding up 2 sets of keys in his hand. "My desk and the small cabinet in my study have locks on them. You can put your food in there. That way, you can't steal from each other." Ms. Wentworth seemed pleased with this arrangement. Not only would she have her own food, but no one would be able to take it away from her. She took one of the keys, cradling it to her chest with a protective hand. Garrett, Amy, and Justin began to go through the contents in the sack. Despite the limited time they had in the shop, Marie had chosen a wide selection of much-needed products. She had avoided soup, favoring chunky stews and chilies, beans, and pasta. A lot of the dry packaged meals were rice-based. Feminine products, aspirin, cough medicine, toothpaste, bottled water, powdered milk, a small bag of kibbles for Walter. Amy sent a silent thank you as she pulled them out one by one. About half an hour later, they had neatly arranged everything into 8 small piles. Amy and Justin put them into plastic bags. When they finished, Amy handed a bag to Garrett and then placed 2 bags on the island counter for Ms. Wentworth and Patrick. Lastly, she and Justin carried the rest. 3 of these bags will go to Daniel's apartment. The remaining 2 will be ours. Are there any objections? Patrick didn't speak up. Maybe it was because Garrett was watching him closely, and the younger man was well aware of it. The silence continued on. With a satisfied nod, Garrett moved toward the balcony. "It's been quite a day, especially for you both. Why don't you get some rest? And I'd like to invite you all to my place for dinner. How does that sound?" "Well, I don't know if I can climb down that ladder," Ms. Wentworth said, wincing. "I have bad hips. And my heart," she trailed off. "I think it's best if we eat here." Patrick paused, then said reluctantly, "Would we have to serve dinner from our portion?" "Of course not," Garrett answered at once. "I have extra camping stuff we can eat. I'll bring them up along with the powdered eggs. Probably best to finish them anyway." He leaned against the railing, thinking, now that we've got extra groceries, we should start thinking about moving. I don't want to make my daughter wait any more than she has to. "We'll talk later," Justin agreed. When he and Amy went to join Garrett at the balcony, Justin paused to throw a glance over his shoulder. "By the way, Patrick, you should do something about that barricade. Find something to replace the bookshelf we broke up. That door's looking pretty vulnerable." "Don't worry about it." "I will," Patrick answered dismissively. He plopped down on the sofa and stretched out his body. "I'm going to take a nap. It's been a rough afternoon." And he promptly shut his eyes and rolled over to his side, showing them his back. Garrett raised his brows, looking faintly amused. Then he turned to Justin and Amy. "I suggest you do the same. I'll see you both tonight." He climbed down the ladder, quickly disappearing from their sight. Chapter 11. Dinner was once again enjoyed by all, despite the circumstances. Garrett had made macaroni and cheese and scrambled powdered eggs, and he'd brought up a large thermos flask of cocoa for everyone. Unlike the previous night, Walter had his own kibbles and warm milk for supper. Amy had no idea why, but she felt a strange premonition that this could be their last meal together. Of course, maybe it was because Garrett was already planning to leave on his campervan. Judging by his words, it sounded like he wanted to leave the next day. "Don't you think that's too soon?" Amy asked as she sipped her cocoa. She understood his urgency. After all, he had a daughter to go to. Her life depended on her father finding her, if she was still alive. "Maybe tomorrow's too soon," Garrett admitted. "We could give ourselves a few days to prepare and come up with a solid plan. But I don't want to delay this any longer than we have to. We might get too comfortable here." Justin's gaze traveled over to the door. "Why haven't you strengthened your barricade yet?" Patrick sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "For Pete's sake. I said I'd take care of it. Stop nagging at me, okay?" "Sure," Justin said, lifting his brows. He turned his attention to Daniel. "What do you think? Will you be ready in a few days' time?" Daniel nodded. "I hope it'll be easier than facing a runner outside." Garrett seemed sure it would be. "At most, we'll probably encounter a few runners in the hallway and on the stairs. Daniel and I will be in front, leading the way." His gaze landed on Justin, Amy, and Patrick. "I want the three of you to watch the back in case there's a stray runner coming after us. Ms. Wentworth, Benson, and Marie will be in the middle." "Where did you park your campervan?" Patrick asked nervously. "I mean, is it close to the basement stairs?" Garrett scratched his head. "To be honest, I'm not sure." He paused for a second, then added humorously, "But more importantly, let's hope no one's trashed or stolen it." They moved the discussion to extra weapons and protective gear. "Judging by the fact that I wasn't infected even though I got runner's blood on my exposed neck, I think it's safe to say that infection doesn't spread through skin contact," Amy said. She glanced at Justin. "You had some runner's blood on your face as well." Daniel smiled. "This is good to know. I did not feel safe with the plastic wrap anyway, and it was very uncomfortable." "What about weapons?" Marie asked. She stared at Benson, who was playing with Walter. "We don't have enough." "Anything can be a weapon," Garrett replied. "We could attach screwdrivers to the ends of broomsticks, make a flamethrower using hairspray and a lighter, or even use a good old axe. Just need to use a bit of imagination." Benson's eyes lit up at the word imagination. "Hey, maybe we could cut up cardboard boxes and put them around our bodies. That can be our protective gear." He smiled up at Marie. "Can you make me a cardboard armor?" Marie smiled and ruffled his hair. "I will try." "That's the most ludicrous thing I've heard all day," Patrick said, snorting. "As if cardboard could protect us from cannibalistic crazies. We need to think of something that has more endurance." "Like what?" Amy asked, sneering. "Chainmail? Leather? A copper breastplate?" Patrick nodded. "Yes, something like that. Now, that's real protection." "Where would we even find them?" Daniel asked, his expression dubious. "At a museum?" Garrett made an impatient noise. "This is a waste of time. Unless you have medieval chainmail tucked away in your closet, I suggest we use what we have to protect ourselves. I vote for Benson's cardboard armor." He grinned at the boy, who grinned back. "It's far from perfect, but at least it'll give us a few precious seconds of protection. Better than nothing at all, I'd say." The discussion was over. Amy felt a lump in her throat. They were actually going to do it. They were leaving the city to go to a safe place. Garrett yawned loudly and padded over to the kitchen. He paused, then reached for a pamphlet lying on the kitchen counter and doodled something on the back. He pocketed it and then tucked his empty thermos flask under his arm. "I'm beat," he said. "Think I'll go back to my place now." His solemn gaze landed on Justin and Amy. "Could you young folks accompany me to the balcony? I want you to pull up the ladder once I get down." Confused, Justin and Amy followed after him. Once they stood in front of the railing, Garrett pulled out the folded pamphlet he'd put into his pocket and handed it to Justin. I drew a crude map to the farm. It isn't hard to reach. Takes about 2 hours by car, but all you have to do is take the Great Memorial Highway and then make a left turn right after you see the neon sign that says, Harold's Diner. Just follow the map from there. Why are you telling us this? Amy asked. Aren't we going together? Yes, we're going together, but plans don't always work out the way we want them to. This is just in case we get separated. Garrett lowered his voice. I didn't mention this earlier because I didn't want to worry the others. But I'm sure everything will work out just as we planned. He reached out to chuck Amy under the chin. Cheer up. We'll all be fine. Stay positive, all right? They watched as Garrett climbed down the ladder and hopped into his balcony. He gave them a cheery wave before entering his apartment. Deep in thought, Justin pulled up the ladder and let it drop on the floor. A while later, he pulled out the folded paper and stared at the map with intense eyes, as though he were memorizing the details. Amy looked up and saw a few people in the building across from there staring at them. They were the same people who'd stared at her earlier in the afternoon. Even from this distance, Amy could see that they weren't faring well. Once their meager supplies ran out, hunger and desperation would drive these people out from the safety of their apartments in search of food. Some would make it, but many others wouldn't. Amy tore her gaze away, suddenly feeling immense guilt for having food while others were starving right before her eyes. She couldn't bear to look at them. We should start packing, Daniel said, startling Amy from her thoughts. He and his wife, along with Benson and Walter, had joined them. Don't forget the armor, Benson added, sending Daniel a reprimanding look. That's the most important part. Justin blinked and hurriedly pocketed the map. He turned to smile at the boy. That's right. We'd better pack and get those cardboard armors ready. We're leaving in 3 days, so let's stay busy. Everyone seemed optimistic about leaving, but Amy still couldn't shake off her previous feelings of premonition. It didn't help that the map inside Justin's pocket only served to increase her fear. This is just in case we get separated, Garrett had said. Just in case. Chapter 12. The first day went by quietly, and the second day looked like it would turn out the same. Justin and Amy packed some of the canned goods and packaged meals into separate backpacks, along with medical kits and personal items. Justin paused as he held up his wallet. Do you think we'll need money and credit cards? He asked with a sudden grin. Who knows? Amy said, shrugging. Some people might still want cash. I know I'm definitely not leaving my ID card, passport, and credit cards behind. Justin tossed his wallet into his bag. What else? We'll need a spare change of clothes and shoes. Maybe a thick jacket. We'll definitely need bottled water. And a Swiss Army knife. He paused to drum his fingers on his thigh. What else? We'll need a flashlight and a box of matches as well. Amy raised her brows. Wow. You've really thought this through. But we won't need most of them in the camper van. Maybe, he agreed. But I'd feel safer knowing that I have these items nearby. You never know when we might need them. Regarding weapons, Justin had taken a great liking to his baseball bat. Amy decided to take Justin's old golf club. She'd never played golf before, but she liked the way it felt in her hands. Next, they cut up thick boxes to make their protective gear. Amy wondered if they were wasting their time. After all, these things couldn't protect them from a runner's bite. She grumbled this out as she used both hands to cut through the thick paper with her small scissors. That's true, Justin concurred. But think about it. A runner will claw at you first before biting you. I think the cardboard will save us from getting eviscerated. Even those few precious seconds will give us time to fight back. He nodded to himself. Garrett's right. It really is better than nothing at all. By the time they were done, Justin and Amy had cardboard wrapped around their lower and upper arms, thighs and calves, and a long piece around their chest. They had left their elbows and knees exposed for better flexibility. We look like idiots, Amy complained as Justin laughed heartily beside her. He insisted that she should twirl around so that he could inspect their handiwork. She rolled her eyes and did a dramatic pirouette. "You look fine to me," he said, trying to keep a straight face but failing miserably. They took the cardboard off and decided to have lunch. Deciding on beef and chili, they sat down at the kitchen counter and scarfed down their meal. "We mustn't leave any food behind," Amy said between bites. To be honest, after dividing the food into 8 equal portions, there hadn't been that much food per person. If they rationed it well, it would probably last for 4 days. Justin and Amy had been subsisting on 2 meals a day to make sure they would have some food to put into their backpacks. Justin nodded. "We'll take everything, even the old gum in my school bag." They shared a bottle of water, making sure to rinse their mouths and swallow the water. Back then it would have grossed Amy out. Now they had no choice. Drinkable water was precious. They settled on the sofa, leaning against each other for comfort. In the next apartment, Daniel and Marie were probably busy as well, packing their bags while Garrett and Benson made their protective gears. Earlier in the morning, Garrett had asked Patrick to pull up the food sack for the camper van, along with his backpack. Holding the rifle in one hand, he had climbed up and crossed over to Daniel's apartment to help Benson with the preparations. By the looks of it, he would be staying there until the next day, when it was time for all of them to leave for good. Amy briefly wondered if Benson was having fun making those cardboard outfits. The poor kid deserved to be happy, even if it was only for a short period of time. He'd lost his dad, and he was among strangers. But at least Marie had taken a maternal liking to him. Amy must have dozed off on the sofa. Something startled her awake, and she jumped. Beside her, Justin mumbled incoherently under his breath, his head thrown back, his neck exposed. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he swallowed. "What time is it?" he asked. What was that? Something had startled Amy awake. Silence, and then there was another thumping noise. And then another one. It was coming from next door. Amy glanced at Justin. "It's coming from your apartment." Justin paused, thinking. Maybe it's just Patrick. He's probably doing something about that barricade. He winced slightly. But does he have to be so loud? There was a muffled scream. "How dare you steal my food? That's my ration." "Lower your voice. You don't need all this food. It's wasted on you. Now stand back, or I'll kick you after I'm done kicking this cabinet door." The thumping continued as Ms. Wentworth continued to rail at Patrick. "They're causing too much noise," Amy fumed. "They're going to bring the runners into our hallway." They hurried over to the balcony and saw Garrett, Daniel, and Marie standing in the next balcony, wide-eyed. Garrett looked furious. "What's going on over there?" "They're arguing about the food," Justin replied. "Don't worry. We'll go over there now to sort this out." The noise had also attracted the runners below. The hissing and snarling grew louder, and Amy saw several of them leaping for the first-floor railing. 2 of them managed to grab hold, and one eventually pulled itself up and into the balcony. Crap! Amy breathed as she crawled over the board and landed in Justin's balcony. Justin followed several seconds behind. Patrick and Ms. Wentworth had left the sliding door wide open. Justin shook his head in disbelief. Just as they stepped into the living room, there was another pounding noise. This time, it came from the outside. The runners in the hallway were attacking the door. The wooden door shook with each hit, and Amy noticed a crack starting to form down the middle. "Ms. Wentworth! Patrick! We have to get out of here!" Justin shouted. The thumping noise in the study room stopped, and Patrick ran out. He looked semi-crazed. "He's trying to take my food," Ms. Wentworth cried as she followed him out. "He ate all of his and—" "Not now. We have to go," Amy shouted, and she grabbed Justin's hand. Both ran out to the balcony. A strange sound filled the apartment, and Amy realized it was the sound of splintering wood. She looked over her shoulder and gasped. There was a jagged, gaping hole in the door. Several runners, bleeding from their heads, poked their heads in, snarling. They began to squeeze their way in. Chapter 13. Go! Justin yelled, pushing Amy forward. She quickly crawled over and landed in the other balcony. She reached out for Justin. "What are you waiting for?" she cried. Justin stalled, looking frustrated, then crawled over to join her. He leaned over the railing. "Patrick! Ms. Wentworth!" he shouted. "You need to get out. Now!" Garrett and Daniel were still standing in their balcony. "What the hell's going on?" Garrett shouted angrily. "They got in. The runners got in," Amy babbled as she felt Justin push her from behind. "Go get our backpacks and weapons. Then go to Daniel's apartment." Justin's face was ashen. "I'll join you there shortly." With a nod, she hurried into the apartment. Moments later, she stepped out to see Patrick burst out into the balcony, his eyes wild and crazed as Ms. Wentworth clung to him. With great force, he pushed her away and scrabbled over the railing. "Let go of me," he yelled when Ms. Wentworth pulled at the hem of his shirt. "Don't leave me," she bawled. "Help me." "Ms. Wentworth," Justin shouted, reaching out a hand. "You have to climb over. You must." In a bid to free himself, Patrick gave a vicious back kick that knocked the elderly woman breathless. She stumbled back, her mouth a perfect O, before losing her balance and toppling over the railing. She fell all the way down, screaming. Her screams were abruptly cut short by the sounds of rending material and something wet and squishy. The runners were in a frenzy, pulling and biting and clawing. Patrick reached the balcony and immediately climbed over again to reach Daniel's apartment. Justin leaned over the railing, shocked as he stared at the runners ravaging Ms. Wentworth's bloodied remains. "Get a move on." Garrett barked at Justin, even as the others all screamed for him to climb over. 3 runners were now standing in the balcony of Justin's apartment. With a snarl, the tallest one climbed up on the railing and leaped. An ear-splitting shot crackled in the air, causing the runner's head to whip back. Its legs hit the 3rd-floor balcony before its body fell to the ground. All of this had happened in mere seconds, but it was enough to snap Justin back to attention. He hurriedly climbed over to Daniel's place just as 2 more shots rang out above them. Garrett pushed them all inside. "Time to go." "Right now?" Patrick sounded incredulous. "Yes. Those things are going to keep coming through Justin's broken door. You saw that thing trying to jump over, didn't you?" Garrett grabbed Patrick's collar and shook him hard. "I've half a mind to leave you here for what you just did, but we don't have time for this. So do as I say and move." Amy and Justin quickly slung their backpacks over their shoulders. Beside them, Garrett, Daniel, and Marie did the same. Garrett's and Daniel's bags bulged with extra weight from the food sack. There was no time to put on their cardboard armor. Benson stuffed a whining Walter into his small backpack and zipped the top, leaving it slightly open for air. "Stay quiet," he said. "No barking, okay?" He looked up at Patrick with a curious gaze. "Where's your bag? Don't you have a weapon?" Patrick fumbled to speak as all eyes landed on him. "I left them behind," he finished lamely. With a snort, Garrett moved to the door and began removing the barricade. "Stay in the middle and try not to get yourself killed." When they opened the door, the hallway was empty. Garrett and Daniel stepped out first. "Let's go." Garrett led them down to the end of the hallway. Pausing, he pressed the butt of his rifle against the exit door and pushed it open. "It's pitch black in here," he said as he turned on his flashlight. "Keep your eyes open and don't fall down the stairs." A snarl sounded behind Amy, and she turned around, gasping. A bloated runner with curlers on her head was stumbling toward them. Her heart pumping with fear and adrenaline, Amy swung her golf club down and watched as the club head smashed into the runner's head. The heavy body slumped against the wall and slid down. There was no time to make sure it was dead. They immediately began their descent down the dark stairs. Their path was surprisingly clear down to the 2nd floor, but here was where their luck ended. Garrett's flashlight revealed 2 runners slumped on the stairs. Snarling, they got up with startling speed and began climbing toward them when Daniel reached down and rammed his fire poker into one runner's head. The other one managed to reach in and grab Benson's shoulder, causing the boy to yelp in fright. Marie released a thin scream and pulled the boy back. But the runner's grip tightened. Just as it leaned down to take a bite, Justin smashed his bat over its head. It fell down the stairs and landed in a crumpled heap against the wall. "Let us hurry," Marie said, wrapping an arm around the shaking boy. They made their way down to the basement floor, where Garrett's camper van was hopefully waiting for them. Daniel paused at the door, hesitant, then pushed it slightly open. Everyone carefully peeked out. There were about 9 or 10 runners shuffling around the semi-full parking lot. Chapter 14. Daniel quietly closed the door. "There are too many," he said. "What do we do?" "We have to make a run for it," Amy answered. "We don't have a choice." Garrett peeked out again. "The campervan's right behind the red sports car. But we need a plan." His lips thinned. "We need to split up." "No!" Patrick managed to cry out before Garrett slammed a large hand against the younger man's mouth. "Stay quiet. You're going to get us all killed," he whispered fiercely. He leaned in. "Can you stay quiet? Can you do that?" When Patrick nodded, he removed his hand. "Now listen. We need to split them up. To do that, we need to do the same. Amy and Justin will go one way. Daniel, Marie, and Patrick will go in the other direction. I'll take Benson and go for the camper van. Once we get in, wait for us on the street. But you have to be in a place where I can see you. I can't waste time searching for you. Understand?" Everyone peeked out once more. "Let's do this," Garrett said, and he stepped out, pushing Benson behind him. Justin reached for Amy's hand. "Don't let go," he said with a strained smile. She nodded and squeezed his hand. Taking a deep breath, they ran out, heading for the parking entrance. Daniel and Marie ran toward the parking exit. Several shots rang out behind them, but Amy's attention was only on their escape. She could hear the runners coming after them, their snarls growing louder by the second. She pumped her legs, forcing herself to go faster, but her limbs struggled with the weight she was carrying. Justin's grip on her tightened, not letting go. They stumbled out into the late afternoon light. Twilight would soon be upon them. They had to leave before nightfall. "Let's hide over there," Justin said, pointing at a green dumpster next to a fruit and vegetable shop. They ran over and hid behind it, trying to quiet down their heavy breathing. They huddled together as rapid footsteps ran past them, and remained that way until they could hear nothing. Justin raised his bat and peered around the dumpster. "Clear," he said. "They're gone." They crouched down and waited. A moment later, Daniel, Marie, and Patrick sprinted out from the exit. Amy stepped out and waved frantically at them. Luckily, Marie saw her. They ran toward them and immediately squatted down behind the dumpster, trying to catch their breaths. Patrick was shaking like a leaf. 3 runners ran past them, their hisses and snarls fading into the distance. When Amy was sure the coast was clear, she stood up and peered over the dumpster, hoping to catch a glimpse of the camper van. Where was Garrett? She heard it before she saw it. The van burst out of the exit and weaved onto the street. To her horror, there was a runner on the roof, slamming its head against the roof vent. Another had smashed its head into the passenger seat window and was trying to climb through. Garrett braked suddenly, violently tossing the runner on the roof. He aimed his rifle at the one reaching for him through the window and blew a chunk of its head off. "Get in," he shouted. They sprinted toward the camper van. Benson opened the door to let them in, but the runner that had been thrown to the ground leaped up and grabbed the flimsy door. "Garrett!" Benson screamed. "It's got the door. It won't let go." The noise had attracted a considerable crowd of runners. Justin and Daniel ran to help Benson, but stopped in their tracks when a runner that had been inside the fruit shop stumbled out from the storage room and blocked their path. It snarled and ran at them. Daniel ran his fire poker through its torso as Justin took a vicious swing, hitting the runner on the side of its head. But it wasn't enough. The runner grabbed Justin's shoulders and bent down to bite his cheek when Daniel pulled out his poker from its torso and rammed it through its head. The force caused the pointed end to exit through the back of its skull. "Are you all right?" Daniel breathed and Justin nodded, dazed. The others joined them. "Where's the camper van?" Patrick asked, his eyes bulging with fear. "It was gone. That bastard left us out here to die," he shouted. "He took our food and now—" "Shut up," Marie said angrily, and everyone turned to stare at her, surprised. She was usually so mild-mannered. Then again, Amy was certain that not even a saint could put up with a jerk like Patrick. He was a burden to them all. "Garrett has his own problems. I hope he managed to throw off that runner." She darted a quick glance at Marie. "I hope Benson's okay." "We have to find shelter," Justin said, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked up at the sky. "It's going to get dark. We can't stay out here. Maybe we should go back to our apartments." Daniel shrugged helplessly. "They are safe." Amy shook her head. "We'll die before we reach them. There are too many runners between us and the building." Her face turned grim. "Besides, we have to leave the city. We have to get to that farm somehow. It's the only way we can survive long-term." Justin peered into the storage room. "I think this place is empty. Let's stay here for tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll return to the parking lot and get my Jeep. It's parked close to the entrance, so it won't be too bad." He took out his flashlight and smiled at the group. "We'll be okay. Come on, let's go in." The group trailed behind him, ignoring the stink of rotting fruit and the sound of flies buzzing everywhere. Amy was the last person to go through. Pausing, she locked the door and pressed her forehead against it, praying that morning would come soon. End of The Collapse, Part 1. I hope you enjoyed The Collapse, Part 1. Please like and subscribe and turn on all notifications if you would like more content from this channel and links to V.A. Brandon's books.